Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. Let's talk about some books. Specifically, let's talk about some books that I read in the month of January. Now, I asked you guys on the community tab if you would rather me film monthly wrap-ups or quarterly wrap-ups, and monthly wrap-ups won out. Now, I have not filmed a reading wrap-up YouTube video since October. So, November, December, January. It's been like 3 or 4 months. Actually, wait, we're in February now. So wait, October, November, December, January. It's been 4 months since I have filmed a reading wrap-up video, because if you have been watching my videos, we had some family stuff go on at the end of last year and I had to step back from YouTube. So I'm like, do I even remember how to do this? Do I even remember how to convey my thoughts about books that I read on the internet? So we're gonna try. We are gonna do our best. And I will say, I do have something up my sleeve for like a quarterly wrap-up type of thing that I am so excited about. So obviously I'll be filming those at the end of every quarter, so make sure you subscribe so you don't miss those videos. But today we are going to talk about the 7 books that I read in the month of January. And let me just tell you, I feel so good about reading 7 books, because last year, if you were following along, I was trying to clear my TBR cart and I was having to read like 10 books a month, and I was just mowing through books. I wasn't really enjoying my reading experience, and I also wasn't that excited about the books that I was reading because I was a girl on a mission. I was trying to clear my TBR cart, and that is what I had my sights set on. So going into 2025, I felt so free in my reading journey, okay? I was like, wow, I can read whatever I want to read. It doesn't have to be just the books on my TBR cart. So I had a good old time this month, just kind of reading whatever I wanted to read. Now, I will say, I did a fairly good job at sticking to my January TBR. I think that I was only 1 off. So I'm keeping track of all of my reads in my planner this year. And so for my January TBR, I was supposed to read Beg, Borrow, or Steal, Yellowface, Anne of Green Gables, Onyx Storm, When the Moon Hatched, Such a Bad Influence, Anxious People, and Beartown. You will know this if you watched my January TBR video. The only one that I did not get to was When the Moon Hatched. I'm actually like halfway through it. So I made a really good dent in it. So I'm proud that I stuck to my January TBR. However, I cannot say the same for February, okay? We're already like a couple days into February, and I've read 2 books, neither of which were on my February TBR. But you know what? It's okay. I still have a lot of time left in February to tackle my actual February TBR. So before we chat about the 7 books that I read in the month of January, let's throw some stats up on the screen, because I'm a stats girly and I love me some data. So for the month of January, I read a total of 7 books. The total number of pages that I read was 2,618. And then the genre breakdown, I had 1 thriller mystery, 3 literary fiction, only 1 romance. That is shocking, truly shocking. 1 classic and 1 fantasy. All right, so let's talk about these books. I want to start off by talking about this one, Onyx Storm, okay? So if you're unfamiliar somehow, this is the 3rd book in a series. I don't know how to say the name of the series, Empyrean, I think. So if you've heard of Fourth Wing, then this is the 3rd book in the series. So I have thoughts and feelings about this one, but obviously I can't say too much because I don't want to spoil anything since it is the 3rd book in a series. I will start off by saying I gave this one a 4.25. I liked Fourth Wing the best. I like this one next, and then Iron Flame, the 2nd book, was my least favorite of the series so far. So Onyx Storm, Miss Rebecca Yarros. All right, so first of all, beautiful, stunning, amazing. I did have a really good time reading this. I was so nervous going into it because I was fairly disappointed in Iron Flame. So I was kind of like, oh, is this one gonna let me down? It did not let me down. It did confuse me though. I feel like I was a little bit lost in parts of this one, and something else that I really wanted a little bit more of, I feel like we only got little sprinkles of Violet and Xaden, and I don't know, I just wanted more of that, you know what I mean? But I do get why we didn't get that because of like what was going on in the story. So overall, I had a good time reading this. It did not let me down. The ending, I did not see that coming. I did not see that coming. And also I was a little bit frustrated that we didn't get, I mean, I get why we didn't, but like I was a little bit frustrated that we didn't have, like, if you read Iron Flame, the second book, like it left us on like a really big cliffhanger. And I thought we were gonna like solve that cliffhanger a little bit more than we did in this book. Like I feel like we didn't really get anywhere like with that. So maybe in the next book we will, I don't know. I've heard that the next book isn't coming out for like 2 years, like 2027, I want to say. I feel like people were not as upset at this one as they were with Iron Flame. I feel like a lot of people did not like Iron Flame, but this one I do feel like was kind of mixed. Some people really didn't like it. Some people really loved it. I was kind of like neutral, but like more toward liking it than like being disappointed. So I know I didn't really tell you much about the book, but like I said, it's the 3rd book in a series, and I just, what can I say without spoiling anything? You know what I mean? If you've never heard of Fourth Wing and you grew up reading Harry Potter, Divergent, Hunger Games, check out the Fourth Wing series because I think you will enjoy it. It's just very nostalgic for me, like this series. So that is Onyx Storm. Again, sorry that I cannot say much about it, but like 3rd book in a series, we gotta do what we gotta do. Okay, next up, let's talk about Such a Bad Influence by Olivia Muntier, I'm not quite sure. So I gave this one a 3.5 stars. This is classified as a thriller mystery. I will say it wasn't very thrilling. It felt more like a mystery to me. I am such a baby when it comes to thrillers. Like anything and everything spooks me, and like I cannot read thrillers before bed or I will not sleep. Like I'm on that level. This did not give me that vibe. Like I was not scared at all. Like I said, it just read more as like a mystery to me. I will say going into this, I heard that the ending was insane, wild, like out of control, gonna blow your mind. I kind of wish I didn't know that going in because I feel like I had such high expectations for the ending that I was let down a little bit, but I did guess the ending too. So this one is about 2 sisters, Hazel and Evie, and they have grown up like on social media. So like their mom is, I think like a YouTuber or something. I don't know. This is the first book I read this year, so a long time ago it feels like. So their mom was like documenting their lives online. So they kind of grew up like in the public eye via social media. And I will say it was very interesting at first, but I feel like this turned into more of like a commentary on kids on social media, like growing up on social media rather than like an actual story. Like I feel like the story got lost a little bit in the commentary, if that makes sense. I did have a good time, but Hazel is who we are reading, like her point of view, and she was a very unlikable character to me. So Evie goes missing. Evie is the sister who was like very into being on social media. She loved it. She made a career out of it, whereas Hazel was not into it. She did not go into social media for her career. She did something else. She's living her life like off of social media. And so her sister Evie goes missing, and she's trying to figure out like, what the heck happened to my sister? She thinks that it is one of Evie's followers on social media that like kidnapped her or something. And so that's kind of what we're following, is we're following Hazel's journey to finding Evie and figuring out like what happened to her. So a very interesting plot, but like I said, it just read as more of a commentary, and I feel like I didn't get enough plot. So if you're looking for like a mystery thriller that isn't too scary, something you can read quickly, I read this in like 2 or 3 days, I think, I would recommend this one. But just go into it knowing that you're gonna get a lot of commentary on social media, kids growing up on social media, like that kind of a thing. It was interesting at first, but then it just kind of like, I was like, okay, like what's happening in the actual story? You know what I mean? That is Such Bad Influence, first book I read of 2025. The next book that we are gonna talk about felt like I was watching a train wreck. Like, let me just get the book. It is Yellowface by R.F. Kuang. Now, this is the first book that I have ever read by R.F. Kuang. I gave this book 4 stars. So we are following 2 authors, okay? Juniper and Athena. Juniper is not a well-known author. She's still trying to like get her career off the ground. Athena is a famous author. She is very well known, and they are friends. kind of. They know each other. I think they went to college together. It's the second book that I read in January, so also it feels like I read it a long time ago. So they are kind of sort of friends. Juniper's like, are we friends? Like, I'm not really sure, but they hang out, okay? And I want to make sure this isn't a spoiler before I say it. Yeah, okay, so Juniper, or June is what they call her, she is with Athena when Athena dies, and it is like this freak accident. And so it happens at Athena's apartment, and June, after Athena dies, I won't tell you how she dies, like it's kind of interesting to read. You're like, wait, what? So June is just kind of like snooping around Athena's apartment after she dies, like after Athena dies, and just kind of looking around. She finds a manuscript that is like pretty much done, and she ends up stealing it. And I'm just gonna say that, and I'll let you kind of, if you wanna read the rest, like read the rest, but it's just like the things that Juniper does, you're just like, oh, are you good? Like, are you okay? Like the choices that she makes, so mind-blowing. I was just like, there's no way she's actually making that choice. Like, there's no way that she is like carrying this out. Like, it was wild. It was so wild, but like, I couldn't look away. Like, I couldn't put the book down. So I thought it, like, this was a book that as I was reading it, I was thinking about it even when I wasn't actively reading it. That's how I know that I'm into a book, is when I'm thinking about the characters, when I'm not like actively sitting down and reading the book. So this definitely did that for me, and I'm excited to read other books by R.F. Kuang. I will say I knocked a star off because some of it started to feel a little bit redundant. I don't think it needed to be as long as it was, and I'm not quite sure that I loved the ending. After, like, when I finished, I was kind of like, that's how we're wrapping this up? Like, that's what we're doing? So I still don't know if I love the ending, but I did have a good time throughout the majority of the book. So I would recommend this, but go into it knowing that it is kind of like a train wreck. You're gonna be engrossed, but like maybe not for good reasons. Okay, next up we have Beartown by Fredrik Backman. I still don't know how to say his name. I gave this 4.25 stars. This is the first book that I have read by this author. And let me just tell you, going into this, I had sky high expectations because I have been seeing this book everywhere, and I have not heard one singular bad thing about it. So I was like, wow, everyone loves this book. It's gotta be good. So I went in like with very high expectations. I will say it did not let me down, but it did take me about a third of the way through to actually care about what was going on. So this, like I said, this is my first time reading anything by this author, so I was trying to get used to his writing style. His writing style is very simple, but so profound at the same time. Like, his writing is so thought-provoking, and I don't know, I haven't really read any style like this before, so it took me about like a third of the book to really grasp his style and to appreciate it for what it is. And at the beginning, okay, so what it's about this town called Beartown, shocking, I know, and it's a hockey town, okay? It's a hockey town in Sweden, and this community is obsessed with their hockey team. Like, everything kind of runs around the town's hockey team. And let me just tell you, I'm not a sports girly. I do not give a flip about hockey. I still enjoy this book, okay? So even if you don't like hockey, you could still enjoy this book too. So this is a very, I feel like, character-driven book. And I read another book by this author later on in January, which we'll talk about in a second. And I'm learning, I think he's a very character-driven author. So anyway, this one is about the hockey team, and something goes down with one of the players. And I don't want to say what it is because it's a big spoiler. I will say check the trigger warnings before you go into this one, but something happens with a player on the hockey team. After this thing happens, the community is kind of divided. And so the hockey team kind of starts to fall apart. I feel like I'm not doing this book justice in describing it because I don't want to give too much away, because a lot of what I want to talk about is definitely considered a spoiler. But okay, so for the first third of the book, I just did not feel like there's a lot of characters in here. Go into it being prepared to hear from a lot of different characters and hear about a lot of different characters, but you will come to know them so well and love them for who they are. I just cannot say enough. Like, after I got over the first third of this book, I could not put it down. I was so engrossed. I was so invested in each character. I just wanted to know what was gonna happen, how the community was gonna move forward after this big event happened. I feel like I'm describing it and it sounds kind of boring. And honestly, when I read the back, I was like, this sounds kind of boring. It's not boring, okay? You are going to be so invested. And there's so much about like loyalty and friendship and taking responsibility for your actions. And it's just so good. It's so good. The hype is worth it. Like, I went into it and I was like, at first I was like, I don't think the hype is worth it. The hype is worth it. I did buy the next 2 books in the series and I cannot wait to get to them. So that is Beartown. Okay, next is Anxious People by Fredrik. Backman. I don't know. I should have looked up how to say his name before I filmed this video, but it's too late. We're already filming it. So you know who I'm talking about. So I read this one and I gave this one 4 stars. I did not like this one as much as Beartown, but I still enjoyed my reading experience. For this one, I read part of it and I listened to part of it, and I did enjoy the parts that I listened to more than the parts that I was like physically reading. So this is another one that is very people driven. It is character based for sure. The actual plot is very outlandish, like very, very outlandish. And it's another one, I just couldn't get into it for like the first like quarter or third of the book. I was kind of like, okay, like where are we going here? But the more that I got to know the characters, the more I cared about the story. So this one is about a bank robber who doesn't actually rob a bank, but he ends up taking a group of 8 people hostage at an open house. So like, I think it's an apartment or something, like there's an open house going on. So it's this failed bank robber who is with these 8 people who are now his hostages. And it's kind of like we get to know all of these characters, including the bank robber, and just their stories about their lives, the things that they carry, the secrets that they have, things that they're grieving. And it's just like, nobody is who they're presenting themselves to be. Like, everybody's just carrying so much junk. And I feel like it's just such a testament to human nature. Like, we all try to like present like we have our lives together, like we've got it figured out, when really on the inside, all of us are like, what is happening? Like, what is going on? So this book just felt like a hug for humanity to me. I was like, wow, we really are all so much more similar than we sometimes remember. So this is a book about people for people, and it will just make you feel, at least me, I just felt very humbled to be a human. And I was like, yeah, we're all just trying to do our best. We're all just trying to figure this thing called life out. And it just made me want to be a more compassionate person. And I like I said, at the beginning, I was like, this is kind of weird, kind of far-fetched. But the more that I got into the story, the more that I just started to like have a soft spot in my heart for each of these characters. And it just made me want to be a better person. I recommend the audio over reading it physically, but either way, I think you'll have a good time if you give this one a go. Okay, next up is Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. I gave this book 4.5 stars. I had such a cute, giddy, wholesome time reading this book. I, for my birthday, got a signed copy of this book, and it is my only signed book that I have, and so it is my new prized possession. But anyway, this is the 3rd book of the When in Rome series, and this series is so wholesome, so pure, so cute. It just makes me so giddy when I am reading it. If you like the show Gilmore Girls, you will love this series. It's just, it gives me the same feeling, like the same comforting feeling as I get when I'm watching Gilmore Girls. It's my #1 comfort show, if you did not know. So anyway, I think this is my favorite out of the 3 in the series so far. So this one follows our 2 main characters, Emily and Jack, and they are both 2nd grade teachers. That is one thing that I did not like. We didn't really get any, because it's summertime, we don't get any insight of like their teacher lives. And I don't know, I thought that was gonna be really cute to read about, like going into it. When I heard that this was about 2 2nd grade teachers, I was like, oh my gosh, how cute. Are we gonna get to like see their students and like see them in the classroom? No, you don't. So don't go into it thinking that like I did. Anyway, they are 2nd grade teachers. They work at the same school, and they are also neighbors. So they went to college together, and they are enemies. I say that lightly, like, are they really enemies in a romance novel? Not really, but you know what I mean. So again, we have Emily and Jack, and they met in college, and they did not get off on a good foot. And so they were sworn enemies in college. And so they end up obviously working at the same school. Like I said, they become neighbors. Jack was actually engaged and he lived somewhere else, but he broke off his engagement and ended up moving back to where Emily lives and like gets a job at the school and moves in next to her. So obviously you can guess a romance ensues, right? I will say Jack is a top tier book boyfriend to me. He is so thoughtful and I like was swooning over his character when I was reading this. He's kind of quirky, kind of goofy, like a little bit nerdy, but like also a cool guy. Like, I don't know. I just thought he was so smooth. Like I loved his character so much and I related to Emily's character so much. She is very like type A, like very tightly wound, like holds her emotions tight and kind of like hyper independent. And I was just like, wow, I feel like I'm reading about myself and this is kind of scary. So that part was a little bit tough for me to read, but like in a good way, in a humbling way. You know what I mean? So anyway, Jack is actually a famous author, but he writes under a pen name. So nobody knows that he is this famous author. And Emily, it's during summer break, so she's off from school, is trying to complete her first novel. And Jack ends up offering to give her some help. His dad is a famous author, but everybody knows that like his dad is a famous author. That's why he wanted to write under a pen name, so that he didn't have to say that like his books got big because of his dad being an author. Like he wanted to like hold his own. So like he couldn't use his name in order to do that. So Emily has no idea that he is like a famous author. She's like, oh, like he wants to help me because he learned some stuff from his dad being an author. And he's just like, yeah, for sure. So Jack is trying to renovate his new house that is next door to Emily. Emily is working on her first book. And this is on the back, I checked, so it's not a spoiler. She accidentally sends the manuscript to her principal, their principal, because they both work at the same school. And they kind of go on this little like mini heist to try to get the email out of the principal's inbox before he sees it. And it's just like so goofy, so funny. Like I said, just had the best time reading this. I love this series. This is the first Sarah Adams series that I have liked all the books in the series. Normally her books are very hit or miss for me. They're a little too cheesy, but this series, it's just gold. It is gold. Okay, and that brings us to the final book that I read in January, and that is Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I gave this one 4 stars, and this was actually the book that we read in my book club. That's What She Read book club. And let me just tell you, I was so scared to read this because I have not read a classic since high school. Now, granted, this is a children's book. It's classified as a children's book, so it's a children's classic. I was still scared, y'all. I was still very nervous going into it because I am 35 and it's been a long time since I was in high school, and I didn't really know if I was gonna understand what was going on, if it was gonna go over my head. Like I just wasn't sure. So I went into this very skeptical, and I ended up having such a great time. So this one is about an 11-year-old orphan named Anne Shirley, and she gets adopted by, I thought it was a couple when I was reading, but it's actually a brother and sister. And a couple of girls in book club, they were like, I also thought that Matthew and Marilla, I think it's Marilla. So I for sure thought that Marilla and Matthew were a couple the entire time I was reading this book. And then at the very end, when something happens and she calls him like, hey, my brother, I was like, excuse me, what? So I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I don't know if I missed something at the beginning where it says that they're brother and sister, but anyway, this brother and sister is now raising this 11-year-old girl, Anne Shirley. But here's the thing, they did not want a girl. They wanted to adopt a boy so that he could help they live on like a farm type of situation. So when Matthew comes back from town, like picking up who they are supposed to adopt, Marilla is like, what are you doing bringing this girl back here? So it turns out they keep Anne, they let her stay, and she is just like no one else they have ever met. She has the biggest imagination. She talks so much, and I really do feel like she just makes their life brighter. But Matthew, he is drawn to her immediately. He wants to give her like a good childhood. He wants to help her like grow. He wants her to know how proud he is of her. Whereas Marilla, she's a little bit more tough. She's a little bit more like walls up. She's like, I do not want Anne to know like how much I love her. I do not want her to know how much she means to me. And she's just a little bit more stern, right? She has like a tougher exterior. So this book, just follows Anne growing up with Marilla and Matthew, and it's honestly a little bit slice of lifey in a way. Like nothing wild is happening. Like we're kind of just watching, it feels like you're just watching them live their lives and just kind of seeing how they go about their day-to-day lives. So it did get a little bit boring, a little bit dragged out, but what kept me engaged was Anne's personality. There were so many quotes and lines in here that I was just like, dang, she is wise for a kid. And I called them Annisms as I was reading. So this is definitely not something that I would have picked up on my own, but thanks to book club voting on this one, I was kind of forced to read it. And I'm really glad that I did. And now I want to watch the movies, the shows, all that stuff. So I would say if you want to read a classic, but you're nervous, this is a good one to start with because it is considered a children's book, even though I'm like, are you sure? But anyway, it was just such a like wholesome, another wholesome read. I love a wholesome read, but it really was. It was very wholesome. The end made me bawl my eyes out. The way that Anne was describing grief, sobbing. I am walking through a season of pretty heavy grief right now. I lost my grandma, who I was very, very close with, on Thanksgiving last year, so a couple months ago. So anytime that I read anything about grief, I'm just like, wow, that hits. But overall, I just had such a good time reading this one. It was a very pleasant surprise. So very glad that I read this one in January. And those are the 7 books that I read in the month of January. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. Comment down below and let me know what was the best book that you read in the month of January. I think if I had to choose my favorite of the 7, it would be Beg, Borrow, or Steal by Sarah Adams. Hope that your February is off to a beautiful start and that you are reading so many good books. But anyway, I love you guys so much. I appreciate you watching and I hope you have the best day ever.